Welcome to the Health, Habits, and Epic Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sherry Price. The goal of this podcast is to educate and enable empowered women to take the next step towards achieving their health, wellness, and lifestyle goals. Let's get started. Hello, my beautiful friend. Today on the podcast, I want to do a little sharing and a little teaching. And the topic we're going to be talking about today is estrogen dominance. And then I will be moving into endocrine-disrupting chemicals. But before I begin, let me tell you why I feel compelled to share this information with you. So last year, I'm starting on caring more and more about my health as I age and wanting to take optimal care of my health as best as I can, right? Not going to be perfect. And so I learned about estrogen dominance as I'm going through this perimenopause into menopause, as you know, and you've been following me on this journey, and learning about what makes our hormones out of whack. So I'm going to talk about some concepts and do maybe some teaching if you haven't heard of these concepts before, because I really want to educate you so you can make the best decisions for your health. Now, I just want to throw out the caveat that I am not an expert in this area. I've prepared quite a few notes that I want to refer to so I get the information correct and then I want to share with you. And I don't want you to walk away from this podcast thinking you have to change everything. Because when I first heard that, of course, my all or nothing brain wants to go to, oh no, now I got to check out everything and make all these changes. And that can be overwhelming. That is not the goal of the podcast. The goal of today's podcast is to bring awareness if you've not heard of these terms before, and you are really looking to make small improvements over time to better your health. And I call that getting to optimal levels of health, right? So we're going to talk about these concepts. We're going to talk about what you can do. And maybe you are experiencing some of the symptoms and you're like, hey, that sounds like me. And I want to investigate this or work with a functional medicine practitioner to look at this even more because it is something I'm concerned about. So today I just want to start with that caveat and then let's just dive in. So estrogen dominance, right? This means excess estrogen essentially, right? We have more estrogen in our body than it is to progesterone. I want to start off first by saying, estrogen is a hormone, and we talked a lot about that in recent podcasts. It's also considered a neurohormone. And I just want to throw that out there because I think we can see it differently when we call it different names. So a neurohormone, right? It's a hormone that circulates in the brain. And so as a neurohormone, of course, it's going to have neurologic effects. So when our estrogen gets too low, when it gets too high, and we are in this estrogen dominant state, right? It can cause symptoms that affect the brain. It could cause cognitive decline. It can change our mood where we're feeling moody or emotional. And that could be the effect of having too much estrogen or too little estrogen. So we want estrogen to be like Goldilocks, right? Right in the right amount, because when it is there, we consider it in the right level and all our systems are like normal, right? We're acting normal. We're feeling normal because it's in balance. Now, we also want to look at the ratio of estrogen to progesterone, because if that ratio is off, that could be a reason we are in estrogen dominance. So we might have more estrogen related to progesterone. So these two hormones work in synchrony with each other. And so there's this harmony that goes on with these hormones. And so when the harmony is off balance, right, that's where we might find ourselves in more of an estrogen dominant state. When we are estrogen dominant, let's just talk about some of the symptoms we might experience. So I already mentioned when we are estrogen dominant, we can feel sad, we can feel moody, we can feel depressed, we can feel anxious, we can feel irritable, we can have mental fog and slow cognition, right? We talked about it being a neurohormone, so those are some of the effects. Some of the other symptoms we might experience PMS, fatigue, brain fog, as I mentioned, a sluggish metabolism, low libido, headaches, migraines, weight gain. We talked about estrogen being needed for weight gain, but too much estrogen can cause weight gain, thyroid abnormalities, sleep disturbances, fibrocystic breasts, yeast infections, heavy bleeding, carbohydrate cravings, and more. So I point out when we are estrogen dominant, how would we know? Our body would give us symptoms. And so I think it's really important when you have symptoms to look at them as a whole body, right? All of your symptoms, not to say, oh, I have headache. A headache will give me Tylenol or something to take away the headache. Oh, and I also have weight gain. Well, give me a drug that's going to help with that. And I also have anxiety. Well, give me a drug that helps with that. Now, we can treat all of the different symptoms with all of the different drugs, but then we wind up being on a lot of drugs and we're just managing symptoms. I rather get to the root of the problem and really treat that. And that way, all of the symptoms can disappear once we get to the root cause. So, I'm always about getting to the root cause, right? It's just like with alcohol. A lot of people just tell us, well, don't drink, right? But we know there's a mental component to wanting the alcohol that's causing the desire and driving the craving. So just not drinking doesn't necessarily cure or help the person, right? They may turn to something else. They may still have the symptoms, and now that they feel worse because they have no relief, because the alcohol was actually giving them relief. So we want to really get to the root cause, and that is really the premise of why I am discussing all of this today, is so that we don't piecemeal ourselves and that we really look at all of the symptoms we might be experiencing and say, okay, what is going on here, right? And so you can start digging into that for yourself and then taking all of this to whoever you work with. Maybe you work with a functional medicine doctor or a primary care physician. And so they can help take the best care of you when you are recognizing all of these symptoms and what they could be attributed to. So when your body produces too much estrogen relative to progesterone, you're going to be estrogen dominant. You would also be estrogen dominant if your body cannot break down estrogen effectively, right? So we make estrogen until we stop making estrogen, right? But we're making estrogen and our body has to break it down. Otherwise, if it doesn't get broken down, it gets recycled in the body. So our body will begin to accumulate it if we're not breaking it down. Another way is that the body is not ridding itself. So maybe it's breaking it down, but those metabolites can still be active and giving some of that estrogen-like effect. But if we're not removing it from the body by stooling, right, we should have bowel movements every day and making sure we're moving those toxic products out. Otherwise, we get an accumulation. So there could be multiple reasons why a woman is an estrogen dominant state. Could be perimenopause, could be menopause, and it could be some of these symptoms or these factors that I've mentioned already. So all of that can lead to this excess estrogen. Now, I want to give you some other factors that can lead to excess estrogen that we know about. One of those factors is chronic stress. I've done a podcast on how chronic stress sets up our body for demise and health decline. And one of those ways that we can get estrogen dominant is that when we are in chronic stress, we know that our body produces the stress hormone cortisol, and that is produced in our adrenal glands. When we produce cortisol, because we're stressed, the adrenals are going to crank out more and more cortisol. And then there's a phenomenon called progesterone steal. So if our bodies are making so much cortisol and cranking that out, we're going to be making less progesterone. So progesterone production suffers when we are under chronic stress. So if our progesterone production is suffering, it means we have lower progesterone, which means the ratio of estrogen to progesterone is going to be off, putting us in an estrogen dominant state. And that's when a lot of people will start to experience sleep disorders or sleep disruption, having trouble falling asleep, having trouble staying asleep, have more anxiety, have more depression. And that is very common in a woman transitioning into menopause. So chronic stress is going to make all of that worse because now we have this progesterone steal phenomenon going on. Another thing that puts us into an estrogen excess state is alcohol. Makes sense from all that you've learned on this podcast about alcohol. We know when we ingest alcohol, the body is like high alert, high alert. Oh my goodness, we can't have too much of this circulating in our blood because we know it can cause us to die if we overdrink. And so it's considered a major toxin. So the liver knows that, the body knows that. And so the liver will be breaking down alcohol. And if it's breaking down alcohol, it's not breaking down estrogen. So estrogen is just accumulating. And so the more we are spending time ingesting alcohol, that's getting the priority, getting broken down, and not the estrogen. So over time, our estrogen levels can accumulate. We can also see an estrogen dominant state in people who carry excess weight or obesity. When we think of obesity, we think of fat that's stored on the body. Now, that fat is metabolically active. It's not just dormant laying there doing nothing. It's actually secreting estrogen. So the more fat mass you have on the body, the more estrogen secretion the person will have, right? So we'll see an excess of estrogen in obesity. We'll also see it in gut dysbiosis, right? There's dysfunctioning of the microbiome. Therefore, we're not able to metabolize it. We're not able to break it down, and we're not able to excrete it. We've got a bad bacteria overgrowth compared to the good bacteria, and the good bacteria aren't there to do its role in helping us utilize, secrete, metabolize, and get rid of estrogen. So when that is imbalanced, it's going to cause imbalances downstream with the estrogen. Poor liver function. So this is aside from just alcohol. Maybe we have poor liver function for other reasons. And so we are not able to metabolize the estrogen. Therefore, it'll begin to accumulate. And then lastly is exposure to xenoestrogens. Okay. So this term xenoestrogens, these are estrogens that are fake that act like our estrogens. So they're things that we consume from the outside that act similar to estrogen inside of our body. And those are called xenoestrogens. So up until this point, we've been talking about estrogen dominance and what can cause it and the symptoms that can occur from being in an estrogen dominant state. Now we're going to pivot to talk about these xenoestrogens and what we can do about them. So xenoestrogens, when I read the literature, I see them using other terms besides just xenoestrogen. So let me first stop and say xenoestrogens are called other things if you're looking on Google or in the medical literature. Xenoestrogens is quite popular, I see, but more commonly used is a term called endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs. So you might hear me just say EDCs because it's short. So these endocrine-disrupting chemicals seems to be the nomenclature that's more so used and maybe more accurate. Maybe it just doesn't just throw off estrogen, but it throws off other hormone or causes other endocrine disrupting things in our body. So we know endocrine is anything to do with our hormones and our endocrine system. And so we have the xenoestrogens that are also called endocrine mimicking or endocrine disrupting chemicals. And then there's another term that we use that I'm going to throw out here, which is obesogens. You may see in the literature that they're called obesogens because when we consume these chemicals or when we take in these chemicals, they can cause weight problems. They can cause us to accumulate fat. They can cause us to not be able to burn fat as well. So they damage our metabolic or our metabolism. And so they are oftentimes referred to as obesogens. Now, xenoestrogens, obesogens, and endocrine disrupting chemicals, these three nomenclature, I'm going to move forward in this podcast and really call them endocrine disrupting chemicals. So we have these endocrine disrupting chemicals. People may just refer to these as toxic chemicals in our food supply, in our personal care products, and all the places that they may be. So why do we worry about them? Because when they get in the body, they have detrimental effects on our health. These endocrine disrupting chemicals, they've been purported to lead to a whole host of things that can go wrong in the body. So let me just name a few. Early onset of puberty in girls. We're thinking that the endocrine disrupting chemicals is leading to girls getting their periods early, down to as early as 8 years of age. Like, what is going on, right? If we are taking in products that kind of act like estrogen, they're estrogen mimicking, well, of course, then girls are going to develop quicker, right? They also have been purported to cause development of breast tissue in boys, right? These estrogen like chemicals, right, causing breast development in young boys. They've been purported to cause and shown actually to cause low sperm counts in men, leading to infertility. And we know that sperm counts in men and fertility is a big problem that's getting worse in our country. It's been shown to be linked to miscarriages, early cognitive decline, brain fog, and certain types of cancer, particularly breast cancer. So those are reasons why I wanted to come on this podcast and really educate you so that you can make the best decision when you are buying products or food. Because I really think what we consume, right, changes us on the inside before it changes us on the outside. And so if we are taking in chemicals that makes it easier to accumulate weight, easier to get a period early, causing low sperm counts, potentially causing cancers, wouldn't you want to know about that? I would. And I didn't learn about this information until about early last year. And when I learned about it, I was like, wow. And that's why I wanted to make a course around all detoxing your body with the foods that you select, with the supplements that are going to help get the gunk out of your body, and then also looking at your personal care products and anything that we touch and consume on a daily basis, because you might want to make these small habit changes so that you're setting up your internal environment and your body for optimal health. So this is all designed to empower you and not to cause fear. So I want to highlight an article that I discussed in the workbook, is that a recent article in May of last year, 2023, showed that halting the use of these personal care products that contain these endocrine disrupting chemicals for just 28 days. They just asked the women, stop using these personal care products that have these endocrine harmful chemicals in it. Just stop using them for 28 days. And what did they find? They found that it led to a reversal of cancer-associated phenotypes within their breast tissue. Yes, so these volunteers of this study agreed to undergo biopsies of their breast. So to start, and then after 28 days of not being on these products. And in just that short amount of time, do you see that it was halted and led to a reversal of these cancer-associated phenotypes? Not that they had cancer, but they were cancer-associated. Like, that is very significant. And I think that's very promising in how quickly, again, our body can get rid of these things and return to homeostasis, return to that optimal health that the body wants to be at, and just get rid of things that aren't serving us. So I found that to be very enlightening, and I included that in the workbook that I put together for the detox program. So if you're watching this podcast on video on my YouTube channel, you'll see I'm holding up the workbook that's talking about all these endocrine disrupting chemicals, and then highlighting what they do, and then also leaving you with many, many action items that you can take so that you can detoxify your body and make better choices going forward. And that's really what I want to empower you to do. Make better choices going forward. Once you're armed with information, once you know what to do, it just becomes easier to do it. Prior to last year, I did not know my personal care products were causing me any sort of harm. I was just using conditioner, shampoo, facial products, washing my face, the makeup. I never looked at the ingredients. Didn't dawn on me to look at them. I just thought, well, if they're on the market, they must be safe. Whoa, was I wrong? And so now that I'm empowered with this information, I want to empower you with this information in case you want to make these small changes that ultimately can better your health. Okay, so if you're inside of Epic You and you want a copy of that workbook, I'm happy to share it with you because really want to empower you to take the best care of your health. So let's talk about some of these endocrine disrupting chemicals. There's a lot of them. And I'm really, to keep this podcast consistent and short, really going to just focus on a few of them that we see most commonly, right? So there's a lot of them out there. We're just going to talk about some of the more common ones. So these are the phthalates, parabens, the pesticide glyphosate, as well as BPA, right? We heard a lot about BPA back in the day, but there's still products that contain small amounts of BPA and actually not so small amounts of BPA out there. And so I really want you to know this information so again, you can make the best choices for you. So phthalates and parabens is where we'll start. And these are in common personal care products, and they are not rare. I was shocked when I started reading labels to know how much these products are in the products that I consume. And I consider to say that I choose products that I thought were healthy. I thought were clean. I thought were good for me, right? Nobody chooses products knowing that it's harmful for you. Really, that's not how we operate, right? We care about ourselves. So we choose products based on if it gets the job done and we know it's not toxic. So if you think it's on the shelf, I just assumed it wouldn't be toxic and I couldn't be further from the truth. So I noticed hair care products. I noticed my facial cleanser that I had been taught in pharmacy school was so good to use because it's got this mild detergent that just gently strips away the dirt. It's not going to lead to acne. It's not going to lead to reducing too much oil, which is going to make your skin more dry or acne prone. So I've been using this product for years. And then I turned it over one day when I was learning this information. And I was like, there are 3 parabens in this product. Not 1, not 2, but 3. 3 of them. I was so alarmed that I felt compelled to do an Instagram reel on this or an Instagram story on this because I was like, what? Yeah, 6 months ago, I was like, I can't believe, do you see this label? I never read it. And there's 3 parabens in this product. And so I was like, wow, I have to find a different face cleaner because I really want to make healthier choices for my skin. And we know anything that gets put on the skin gets right absorbed into our bloodstream, right? Skin is our biggest organ. And so what we're putting on our skin matters. It gets absorbed. We want it to get absorbed, right? We're not just putting moisturizer on it just to evaporate. No, we want it to stay as a moisturizer. And so my moisturizer wasn't even as clean as it could be. So until I started really educating myself and looking at the products and understanding what harmful ingredients I wanted to stay away from, I can make better choices. Now, with that said, I will say you start looking at all your products and you'll go a little bananas because I wanted to swap out so many things and that could get really costly. Not only that, you have to have a backup. Like, what are you going towards? And so finding a comparable product or a comparable color for your foundation or your blush or your bronzer, that takes time, right? And you want to like the consistency. I've been through a number of bronzers. Some I don't like how they go on too thick or how they come or there wasn't the right color. So really finding the products also takes time. So don't think you have to do this overnight. And for me, I just take it as my products get used up. The facial cleaner had to go because that probably was the worst one with 3 parabens. And I'm like, no, that's not allowed. So I started just cleaning it up little by little, and I'm still in that journey. And I started it probably 9 months ago, and I'm still slowly clearing out things. So I just want to put that out there because I don't want to cause alarm or fear or that you have to do it overnight, right? We just want to make wise decisions. Once we know better, we do better. I love that Maya Angelou quote. Once we know better, we do better. And that's what I want to empower you to do. So as I mentioned, body washes, soaps, candles, shampoos, facial cleaning products, sunscreens. Sunscreens have some harmful chemicals in them. Hairsprays, makeup, and a whole bunch more. Toothpaste, right? We can go down the list. So I want to take a side note for just a little bit because we're going to continue on talking about phthalates and parabens, but BPA. Right? We know that BPA, we had reports that were showing that it was affecting fetal brain development. So we really wanted to get BPA levels really low, which stands for bisphenol A. And so we know it's in the lining of aluminum cans. And so we've tried to reduce those. And a lot of the cans will say that they're BPA free. We know baby bottles are BPA free, right? A lot of products are now coming out with that BPA free label, particularly for those women who are nursing or have young kids. We know that it can harm fetal brain development. but it is still around. And so you still want to be cognizant looking for it for you, right? You want to make sure your brain's still developing, right? So it's found in grocery store receipts, which is why I see a lot of cashiers wearing gloves, right? So that it doesn't get absorbed through the skin as they're handing out receipts all the time. So if you don't need that receipt, consider doing digital or just saying, I don't want the receipt and have them throw it away, because we just don't want that getting absorbed through the skin. Another one I mentioned earlier was with the pesticides, right? And so this is why I try and I recommend others to shop organic if they can and if it fits in their budget, because we know that they're not going to be sprayed with all of these pesticides. And if you can't do it for all of your food, or you don't have the options available where there's always an organic variety or option to choose, at least start with the Dirty Dozen. You know, the Environmental Working Group puts together the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Just start making sure that if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to really work on those products that are dirtiest and clean those up. And so I'm going to buy organic versions rather than, the non-organic, because of their pesticide content. And we just want to make sure that we're reducing our toxic burden, our toxic load, right? So reducing the amount of pesticides that we ingest. And if you can't buy organic or it's not available, really washing the product when you bring it home. And so trying to scrub off the pesticides as much. And I know some will seep into the fruit or the vegetable. So again, if we can do the Dirty Dozen, use that as a guideline. It really, really helps. So just consider where, pesticides might be used. If you live close to a farm, pesticides, the runoff can get in the water, which we're going to talk about here soon. But really looking at how to reduce the toxic burden as much as you can. So try to buy organic when you can and when it fits into your budget. Next, another way to reduce the endocrine disrupting chemicals is to reduce your exposure to plastics. As you go throughout your day, I never really realized how much I come into contact with plastics. I would take a plastic water bottle anywhere I'd go, right? Just have water, because water is good for you. Drink the water. Then I realized, wow, plastics might be seeping in, particularly if that water bottle heats up, might seep into the water. And then I was just thinking of other ways that I come into contact with plastic throughout the day. It's everywhere. And so this is not an absolute all or nothing. I'm not saying we have to get it out of our hands and away from us all the time, being perfectionistic about it, but really reducing how much you get exposed to plastics, right? I carry plastic bags, so can you switch to a tote bag? Just looking at those ways that you can reduce it. I know when we go out to dinner and I'm not finishing my meal, we get it to go. It goes in a plastic container. Please do not heat up plastic in the microwave, right? If you get coffee, oftentimes it goes into plastic, or it has a plastic lid, or it has a lining on that cup. And there's some harmful chemicals in there that could seep into hot coffee. So just being diligent and just being aware of the choices you're making. You may choose to make different choices or you may not, but I think it's really wise just to know this information so that you can make the best choice for you. I myself want to reduce as much plastic. So this is why I will use stainless steel water bottles and try to take that everywhere I can. I also got one for everyone inside of Epic U, because plastic water bottles, cutting that out and, having an option that is available to you so you can recycle and reduce the use of plastics, also take care for our environment, and then not absorb those nanoplastics that can get inside from those products. As I mentioned, I recently swapped out my bronzer, but I also look for products that maybe don't even come in plastic. So my makeup cleanser now comes in a glass bottle, and I think that's healthier when you can. Not all products will, but when you can, choosing glass over plastic. And so to reduce your exposure to plastics would be one way to reduce these chemicals from getting into your system. And then another way I want to recommend that I think is huge and maybe has the biggest bang for your buck if you are going to invest in something is to get a water filter. Most of the water, the tap water in the United States, has harmful chemicals in it. Heavy metals, chlorine, It could have runoff from farmlands with pesticides. It can have other things in it, like pharmaceuticals. It can have a lot of things in it. And those might be micro amounts. I've actually read the water report for San Diego, where I am at, to understand what is in my water. And even trace amounts may not be harmful if you just drink the tap water occasionally. But just think if you continue to rely on tap water and drink tap water that is not filtered, right? Over time, you can get accumulation of these heavy metals. You can get accumulation of things in your body, and maybe your body is not so good at removing it. And so this is something that I feel passionately about, to take that step and buy a water filter. We have a reverse osmosis water filter for our kitchen sink. And so we drink that reverse osmosis filtered water because we drink a lot of water. And we need water, right? We can't live without water. So I think, to get the most bang for your buck, going with a filtered water system is a great idea to reduce your toxic burden, because we are going to drink water and we need it to survive. If you don't get one that's under the sink, that's fine. You can get one that lies on your countertop, or one that you can put water in it and will filter it. What I recommend, though, is looking for one that is third-party tested. Not too long ago, one of the more popular water filters that probably a lot of us had, I had in college, they haven't been third-party tested. And when they were third-party tested, it showed that they weren't filtering as much as the company claimed it was filtering. It was filtering some, but it wasn't filtering all the things. And so I really enjoy seeing something that's third-party tested, because, the company went and spent that additional money to get it third-party tested and verified that it does what it does. And so the company can say, yes, it does filter all of these things. So I think that's really important when selecting a brand. Look for one that's third-party tested, because you want to make sure that the actual chemicals, the PFAS, the phthalates, the chlorine, all of that is getting filtered out of your water. And you drink water every day. So it would be the biggest bang for your buck to invest in a water filter. That being said, I also think we absorb water through our skin when we shower. So consider getting a shower head filter as well. So this information, again, wasn't to alarm you. It was to empower you to make the best decisions, because those tiny habits that we do every day, like drinking filtered water over time, right, is going to help give us the most epic, optimal health. And that's what I want to empower you to do. I also like supporting brands and companies that have a great mission to reduce the toxic burden in our products. And I'll just mention quickly Beauty Counter. Also, Primally Pure. Primally Pure is one that I use a lot. I was a brand advocate for Beauty Counter because I love their mission. When you see their mission and their products, they're really trying to do their best to change legislation and to really take care of the products out there and get rid of these harmful chemicals. One thing I like about them is they have a never list. You can just go to their website, even if you don't buy anything. They educate you on the products that you should be looking out for and the harmful chemicals. Please go to that. I think that's really a great place to start. You just find the never list on their website. It'll talk about these 2,800 questionable or harmful chemicals that they never use in their products. So at least you're getting some education on what are those products, what are those ingredients to look for. And so if you don't want to use their products, right, you are armed with knowledge on what ingredients you're looking for outside of that company. That 2,800 includes nearly 1,700 chemicals that are banned or restricted in the European Union. So they're banned and restricted elsewhere, but we're still allowing them here in the United States. And so they want to really clean up our personal care market. And I really support that mission. So I can't end the podcast without naming 2 other harmful chemicals that we some of us routinely imbibe in or ingest, and that's alcohol, right? So we want to get to the lowest amount we can there, because we know that that's a harmful chemical and toxic to the body, and particularly in accumulation over and over time. Another one would be refined, processed Carbohydrates and sugars, right? Those are also considered toxic for our body, and just set up a body that's going to be more prone to developing disease, more prone to developing inflammation, more prone to developing diabetes and all of those consequences that come with it. So again, it's not being all or nothing. It's starting with these small habits, making these small changes that over time really impact your health. I hope you found this podcast helpful and beneficial, and you've taken some pearls away that you are going to implement into your life. All right, my friend, I hope this empowered you to choose wisely when you are making decisions. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. If you're ready to take the next step to improve your health, wellness, and lifestyle goals, head over to www.epicu.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Again, that's EPICYOU.com. Please note that the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice.